What is the essence of HermitCraft? This is the topic that I want to, at the very least, give my opinion about. Now, I've been watching this series since the end of season 3, which is, not as long as some, but a lot longer than most, I would say. And as a purely outside perspective, as just a fan who has zero stakes in the server whatsoever, I feel like I have somewhat of something unique to say about it. Like, I could just give, the age-old story of how HermitCraft began and how it got to where it is. And to be honest, there were a few drafts of this topic that were more like that, but I think there's more value in just kind of giving my own personal experience. Why has HermitCraft stood the test of time when so many other Minecraft icons have been lost to the sands of time? And to be honest, I wasn't sure this series was going to make it this far. There were more than one instances where I feel like it had tapped out its potential, where it has gone as far as it wanted to, or as far as it should have gone. And one of those was actually pretty recent. I don't know if this is a bit of a hot take, but I was not a particularly big fan of Season 9. Like I said, I've been watching since end of Season 3, but Season 9 was the first season in quite a while that I just straight up bounced off of. I just stopped watching. I stopped watching the recap. I kind of just thought I was probably done with this series for a while. But then, one day I was bored, so I just binged my way back up to the present again, and, well, here we are. Now, Season 9 really had its moments. It had the TCG, the crossover, decked out. But that's kind of my point. It kind of just felt like a series of disconnected events that were just strung together one after each other. It didn't really feel like there was much continuity in the season. And if I'm being honest, if decked out didn't happen, I really think the season would have ended 8 weeks earlier. It really was the last thing holding it together. And yes, a lot of individual hermits had some pretty good endgames, but I'm not talking about individual players. I'm talking about the community as a whole, the server as a whole. It just didn't really feel like it had much reason to keep going. I don't really know why it kept going as long as it did. But Season 10 started a week ago. And to be honest, it is so fresh already. It's just clear how much fun all the hermits are having. I know there's the whole, new world feel, if that makes sense. But something just feels different this time. It really feels like the hermits just want to be there. It really feels like this series has a reason to keep going. And that was kind of my spark. That was my spark to finally take the plunge and make this video. So let's start the story at the beginning. Like I mentioned twice before, my journey of HermitCraft started at the end of Season 3. I was watching a lot of mumbo jumbo around that point. And I think just cat. Can you relax, please? I was watching a lot of mumbo jumbo around that point, and I think one of his HermitCraft episodes just got recommended out of the fly, so I clicked on it and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I don't think I'd ever been introduced to the concept of collaborative Minecraft before. I knew Minecraft servers like Mineplex and whatnot, but a collaborative as opposed to competitive. And I think that's the first part of what makes HermitCraft so special. Kitty, relax, please. Go into the blanket, okay? HermitCraft isn't anything particular. It's just vanilla Minecraft with a bunch of creators who just happen to have YouTube channels. It's all it really feels like, and I think that's the first big point. It's accessible. Anyone can watch HermitCraft and understand what's going on, because there's nothing to really understand. Honestly, I'll play a lot of Minecraft myself, but I usually just go through I'll play Minecraft for hours and hours and hours for a couple weeks at a time, and then I'll just put the game down for a month or a couple months. And that's fine. That's just the way I like to play it. But it's always series like HermitCraft that always kind of re-spark that intrigue, re-spark that creativity. Wants me to just get back on there and keep building. And I actually remember like I just started watching HermitCraft season 3 at the very end, but like when it was announced that the series was ending, I was actually kind of surprised. I don't think I'd really been introduced to the concept of like, I don't know, kind of just like ending a world before. Like it felt kind of weird to kind of like play on a server, play on a world for so long, and then just to pick it up and move on to something else. But I mean, honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Again, I think that's another point. That HermitCraft just, it isn't afraid to kind of just end things. It doesn't drag on to infinity. It recognizes when a world has served its purpose, when it's gone as far as it can, and then it, it just ends. Put the world up for download and then move on to the next one. So I guess I would leave this into season 4, and this is probably more of just a nostalgia thing, but honestly, this was probably one of my favorite seasons. It was just a really good time to be a viewer. This was like the, what they call it, the Mesified server, the one was in the Mesa biome. And I think that's something the old HermitCraft seasons used to do a lot. They were very kind of like gimmick focused, right? So season 4 was the Mesa biome, season 5, I mean, we'll get to season 5, but season 3, that was the Amplified terrain, which, I mean, it's kind of like a fun Minecraft history lesson almost. Does anyone talk about Amplified like ever anymore? Like, I don't think I've heard the term used like at all. I assume it's still in the game, but honestly, I haven't checked. It's basically where it just like cranks like the world height up to like, no, I think the world height stays the same, but it cranks like the generation up to like 11. So you have like super tall mountains and super deep ravines, which, I mean, it's kind of just like, vanilla train generation nowadays. But back in the day, it was like just a super fun world. It required a really strong PC, which is probably why the Hermits never did that concept again. But I don't know, that was just kind of a fun time. Yeah, so season 4 was in the Mesa biome, which, like I said, was pretty cool. It gave his own identity. This was the first season had a shopping district, which became a staple going forwards. And all in all, it just kind of felt like this was the season where HermitCraft kind of found its identity. Like, I haven't mentioned this up to this point yet, but back in the day, the HermitCraft, like, cast list changed a lot. Like, it was, like, not uncommon for, like, 5 new Hermits to be added in the season and, like, 5 other Hermits to drop off. Like, if you go to, like, the HermitCraft wiki and you just, like, look at the cast list for like season 1, season 2, season 3, you'll really be surprised just how many Hermits have been on this series at one point in time. But season 4 was the first season where this class is like really stabilized for the first time. Like I think it added 6 new Hermits. See if I can list them. I think it was Iskal, Stress. Oh boy, put myself on the spot here. Cub Fan, Scar. I think ZF was season 5. Oh man, who am I missing? Bitches Beef, I think? I don't want to say XP Crafted, but I think he had to return from a previous season. Anyway, my point is like a lot of iconic Hermits are all added at the same time, which is, kind of really cool to look back on. Like I said, Hermits came and went a lot, but just like put so many like very iconic Hermits all in the same season. Rendog was out of this season. That's a popular one. Damn, I forgot what I was saying now. Right, yeah, to just like drop so many important Hermits and like all at once was just really, really cool, honestly. Like, of course they didn't plan ahead. Like, they had no idea what the future would look like, but looking back, that's just really interesting. They just nailed it all in one go. I guess you could say they kind of struck gold, which is kind of ironic because, again, Mesa biomes, at least in modern Minecraft, are known for spawning like unusual amounts of gold ore. So, struck gold in the Mesa biome. It makes sense. I think I'm getting a bit rambly at this point, but like I said, season 4 is just where it felt like HermitCraft really just found its identity. Like, it really felt like it wasn't being so malleable anymore. It felt like it had found its groove and it was going to stick to it. Which is actually a bit of a problem. We'll get to that in a second. So moving on to Season 5, it did have a gimmick, although I think a lot of people kind of forget about this one. Well, I don't know if forget about it. I mean, the gimmick didn't really land the way it was supposed to. So under Spawn, there was like this giant, like hand-dug cavern with this absolutely incredible tree down there. And this was supposed to be kind of like a community mining project. See, back in Season 4, I think the seasons spanned 1.9, 10, and 11. And Lytra added in 1.11, I think. At least I think the end update was in 1.9. I think the End Dragon revamp, like the End Dragon Fight revamp was 1.9, but like the End Allies wasn't added to 1.11. Anyway, so Lytra was added 1.11, but I know some people maybe forget, the rocket powered Elytra flight wasn't added to 11.2. So there was actually like I don't know how many like months this was, but there was a period of time which you had Elytra, but you didn't have the rocket power. And man, this was like a golden age of Minecraft. People really got creative in how to do this. There was these, I mean, the HermitCraft server was littered with these, but this was like all over the place. Had like these boat launchers. You would stack like 100 like boats in a single spot, and when it like walked into it while flying, you would be like launched sky high. And that's just how you would take off, which is a very Minecrafty solution. And then once in flight, you would have like these punch 2 bows. Like you would shoot yourself with a punch 2 bow, and that would give you like the boost forward. And it was like a rhythm to it. Like you could really like master the punch 2 flight. And like I said, it was like a real golden age. This is just like a very Minecrafty thing to do. Take a solution and combine like a completely unrelated mechanic in a completely ridiculous way to get what you want. Like that's kind of what I love about this game. And I think this kind of short era was what really showed it off. Anyway, so rocket power flight. I remember Mumbo built a dogfighting arena as soon as that was introduced. And it was pretty cool. It went over pretty well. But I think Exuma noted that like building a sphere on that scale would be like a pretty difficult thing to do in Minecraft, and it might actually be easier just to straight up dig like a sphere in the ground. So that's what he did. He made I think it was even bigger version of Dogfight Arena underground, and long story short, he was wrong. It turns out digging a big hole like that is very difficult, but you got a few hermits to help out, and I believe that's what sparked the initial inspiration that like a community mining project would be really, really cool. At least in the Season 5, where it was supposed to be like a big community digging project under Spawn, and I honestly don't know what went wrong here. Like, it just didn't really plan out well. I think Scar ended up like spearheading the entire project, and he did a fabulous job, but the fact that it was supposed to be community-based ended up just not being was kind of disappointing. I think this was like... The shopping district also didn't make an appearance this time. There was no like resources for diamonds. It was like resources or diamonds for services. So like you couldn't sell like an item, you had to sell a service, which was a cool idea, but I think like it wasn't always easy for hermits to like find the right time to like collaborate together, so that didn't plan out too well either. And I think this was even like during the time of like the first adpocalypse. So even then, so it was like an underperforming season. Ad revenue was like sporadic as it's probably ever been up to that point, at least. Like it was just a rough season for a lot of hermits. I mean, Mumbo had a great season. I'm not gonna lie. Like I remember the ocean base, the Guardian farm, the time he crashed the entire server with like 1 million pumpkins, which was pretty fun for us, the viewer. I meant not for the server. That was probably pretty stressful. But I think that goes back into what I was saying at the beginning: is individual hermits aren't what really make this series. It's how they interact together. Right, there's kind of a difference between playing on the same server and playing together. And I don't think HermitCraft really quite found its stride there yet. And Season 5 being, like, dare I say the flop it was, I wasn't sure if the series was going to recover. I thought, well, maybe this is it. You know, five seasons is pretty damn good for a YouTube series. And maybe it just run its course. But, of course, it's not where the story ends, and it actually... I think this is better marked as like the end of an era. I'd call this the HermitCraft BC era, And I'm going to let you guess what C stands for because it's not Christ. So this brings us into Season 6, which might just be the most iconic season of them all, to be honest. This season only added one new hermit, which was completely unheard of. Like I said, like hermits came and went a lot before this point, but just adding just one single hermit was pretty minuscule. But of course, this one hermit was green, and in a collaborative space, green is worth like 100 people. I remember watching this season for like the first time, and I remember like I knew who green was, just for like word of mouth, but I hadn't really like watched him much in like these multiplayer settings. But as soon as he started like interacting with the hermits, I knew like out of the gate this guy had a really good knack for multiplayer. Like he really knew how to be part of a community, and this was what I call the start of the collaboration era, which is what C stands for, by the way. HermitCraft BC is before collaboration. This is where like the series really like had its cast set out. That was around like season 4, season 5. But this is the first time they really kind of learned how to like be together on a server, if that makes sense. And you have like a lot of iconic like multiplayer activities. There's the tag, the Civil War, of course, Demise, and I think each and every one of those was spearheaded by Green. I think the prank war, I mean, honestly, it's kind of debated where exactly that started, but like turning it into the Civil War in the end, that was definitely Green's idea. I think he learned that from Tag, because Tag was a cool event, but it really spiraled out of control pretty damn quickly. Like I think it's a very important part of like a successful like multiplayer activity is like well-defined rules, so no one gets like confused about what you're supposed to do, but also letting people kind of inject their own personality into it. So like the initial tag rules are very, very simple, but one of the rules is that it can change over time. And that every time someone else gets tagged, you can kind of add your own little idea to it, which really helped the game, stay interesting. But what started as like get slapped by a fish, now you're it, turned into get slapped by a fish, climb the tag of tower or something. No, the tower of tag. The Terror Tower of Tag? I don't know what that thing was called. Do like a crazy parkour course where some like pants for some reason, and like it really just spiraled out of control. I think Green learned from this and understand, okay, you need to like, letting a game grow over time is good, but you really need to know when to kind of cap it off. So when the prank war was growing to the same point that Tag was, I think Green understood that it needs to have an end. So defining the Civil War is like, okay, this is the end of this game. This is where it's going to end. Let's go with a bang, not a whimper this time. And yeah, it was one hell of a bang. Honestly, it's kind of hard, or it's kind of interesting to think that like it took 6 seasons to get to this point, to get to anything on the scale of the Civil War. Because it really was just that damn cool. But like also like a server-wide collaborative project, that doesn't seem like it should have taken this long, but I think that's also my point. Like, just because it seems obvious doesn't mean it's easy to pull off. And I think HermitCraft really kind of took Green's like expertise in that area to make it happen. I guess that leads us into season 7, which in my opinion was kind of just more of 6. I think this is the first season in history that didn't add any new hermits. And some old hermits may have returned, I don't quite remember, but I don't think any new hermits were added at all. It was just the season 6 cast again. And season 7 was pretty iconic in a lot of its own ways. It had the Turf War, of course, Mumbo for mayor, who didn't even get elected. I think that whole like Grumbot, like that plot line was just so much fun. In fact, they had the whole like Mumbo for mayor thing started, and I don't think he got any votes in the end. Like neither Green nor Mumbo even voted for him in the end. And he ended with Mayor Scar, which was pretty awesome. I still kind of see like references to that today. The HermitCraft, the HCBBS, right? The HermitCraft Big Base Swap. But wasn't also the HermitCraft Big Barge Sweep or something? Like I swear these are like these definitely both happened in season 7, but do they have the same acronym? I cannot remember. Anyway, I don't think I have that much more to say about 7. Like I said, it's just more of 6. Which is good, but staying to like the same pattern is not always a good thing. like it may be comfortable to like kind of stick with your stride once you found it, but things kind of get boring after a while. Like we've learned a few times, with like tag, for example, right? You have to learn when to let something end. And that goes with kind of like even just an era as well. So with season 8, they really tried something different. And I mean like really tried something different. And honestly, I really like season 8. It was a lot of fun. Bodum versus the Octagon. Yeah, Mumbo Moon Big. That's just probably one of my favorite HermitCraft memes. And it was a really fun time. And I was quite surprised to find out that this season was really controversial. Like, I was surprised that it ended so quickly. Like, I wasn't expecting that ever, but I guess that type of thing never really bothered me that much. And I think that, honestly, is probably Season 8's biggest mistake, was just poor communication. I think a short season isn't a bad idea. I think with just 7 long seasons, or 7 seasons behind it, with the expectation every season is like just as long or longer than the previous one, have like a short season just like that right out the gate was, I don't know, just kind of felt almost like a trick, I guess. And like I understand the idea of not wanting to spoil where the season's going, but I feel like they've just been open at the beginning saying, hey, this is going to be a short season, we're waiting for the Gazing Cliffs Part 2 to drop. And this is just going to be it's going to be a good story, but it's not going to be the typical HermitCraft flank you're used to. I think that would have just more or less fixed all the issues. So, if HermitCraft ever wants to attempt this type of like short season again, I think that kind of communication might just be what it needs. And again, I don't have a lot to say about season 8. Like, I guess one thing to say about the collaboration era is that just all the seasons feel a little bit samey. Like I said, this was kind of almost the end of kind of like the gimmicky era. Like I told you, original HermitCraft used to be pretty gimmicky, where it relied on like, I don't mean gimmicks in a bad way, but like it relied on like every season kind of having its own thing to kind of, set it apart from the others. But after season 6 kind of found something like really popular, or really like effective, I should say, it kind of felt like every season after was just trying to kind of do more of the same. And I guess in my mind, all these seasons kind of like grouped together a lot. And I guess that just brings us straight into season 9, which I kind of hinted at earlier I wasn't a huge fan of. I think this is where like it was starting to show that the collaboration era, it kind of had like reached its tipping point. Like there wasn't a whole lot more they could do with it. Like the season had a lot of standout moments, but a lot of them were kind of like rehashes of things already been done. Like you had the whole Ren the King era, which was kind of reminiscent of Scar the Mayor from season 7. The crossover was completely unique, of course, but even then you had the return of Grumbot. The whole setup too, the whole lore set up before the actual Rift open. That was a lot of it was literally from previous seasons. That was kind of the lore the Rift was bringing in stuff from previous worlds. And then you had the even the perimeter, people say, was reminiscent of the prank war. I don't know if I quite agree with that. That was kind of unique and completely just came out of nowhere, but there's some similarity there, I guess. Even Decked Out, which was probably the biggest event on the server, was still technically a sequel to something made in season 7. And I'm not saying they were running on ideas to the point in which they're just reusing plot lines. I just mean when you interact with the same people in the same way for so long, these repeated kind of interactions are inevitable, which I think is my point. There's only so much you can do with a certain style. You kind of have to mix things up after a bit. And that's why I was so excited to see season 10 pop off the way it did. It really does feel fresh. Of course, you got, the new Hermits, Skiz and Joel, who, I pretty much predicted Skiz. I think that was, if not season 10, I thought it was at least inevitability that he would eventually be added to the server. And Joel, I admit, was a complete surprise. I did not see that coming, but honestly, I'm really excited to see how these two kind of interact with the rest of the cast. And I think you mentioned this earlier, but maybe it's just kind of new world kind of vibes, but it really does feel like the Hermits want to be here. It's not just a new world, a new seed. It's really does feel fresh. It really feels like, it kind of feels like season 9 was kind of reminiscent of season 5 in that way. Like it's kind of the end of its era. It's kind of like this kind of era, this kind of way of doing things is starting to drag on a little bit. Maybe it's time we try something different. And of course, it's like way too soon to tell what season 10 is going to bring. But just from the vibes I'm getting, I really think like this is going to be something different. And we started to see this a little bit in season 9, but I feel like the collaboration era was very collaborative, but it was very reliant on kind of Green to spearhead a lot of this stuff. Like, I'm not trying to say Green was like the only reason it worked. I think he was just really the spark that let it happen. But time and time again, it kind of felt like that spark was necessary, if you know what I mean. But in season 9, we saw a lot of projects that Green had nothing to do with, like the TCG, Decked Out. Like, it really felt like this was the season where some Hermits were feeling a little more confident to tackle these bigger collaborative projects to kind of spearhead one of their own. And I think that's kind of what's going to start to define the era upcoming. It's not going to be like, a few Hermits kind of leading the pack. It's going to be everyone contributing in their own way. And I feel like that's just going to be really cool. I guess that's the end of my off-brand HermitCraft recap. So I should probably wrap this up with the initial question. What is the essence of HermitCraft? What makes it so special? And I think, simply put, HermitCraft is so successful because, in a way, it's a perfect reflection of the game is built on. Like, you could ask a question, why is Minecraft so successful? Why is it still relevant? Like, 10, 15 years later? Almost, not quite. Like, Minecraft is, in essence, it's a game about simplicity. It's a series of individual but well-defined mechanics that in their own or on their own don't do a whole lot, but when you put them together, that's when you really get the complexity that makes this game what it is. And I think HermitCraft is a perfect reflection of those values. It's pure vanilla. I mean, maybe nowadays, like, there's a little more, like, kind of mods in there, with, like, the armor stand book. A lot of Hermits use free cam and stuff, but you know what I mean, right? Like, they're technically mods, but they don't change the spirit of the game, which I think is important. Like, I've never really been a big fan of modded Minecraft, mostly because of that. It just feels like it's just way too complicated. Minecraft isn't a game about complication. It's about simplicity, and its complexity comes from the way you choose to integrate those simple components. I mean, HermitCraft might just be the best server that keeps true to Minecraft's roots. In a way, it might just be the most Minecraft server out there. And I think that is why it stood the test of time. I think that's why it's going to keep standing the test of time. HermitCraft never deviates too far from its roots, but it also is not afraid to try new things, or when they don't work, it's not afraid to, backtrack and try something different. And something starts to get stale, it's not afraid to shake up the formula and take the series in a new direction. And for a long-time viewer, that's quite nice to see. Like, I just spent this entire video talking about my entire experience with the server, and I mean, like, I've been playing Mineplex. Well, I used to play Mineplex probably around the same time, but I could probably even talk for like 5 minutes about that because it doesn't change that much. HermitCraft has changed a lot. It's a story worth telling. Honestly, I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself a little bit here, but I guess that's all I really have to say. What's the essence of HermitCraft? Well, its essence is it's Minecraft. It's the most Minecrafty Minecraft out there. Yep, that's it. See you next time.